Right, so I thought we might start off by taking a look at my original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition books. First one I acquired was the Monster Manual. After that, I got a copy of the Player's Handbook. And unfortunately, it took me so long to acquire the first two books that when I finally got the Dungeon Master's Guide, it was the new copy, the new hardcover art. And then I also, as the fourth core book, had Deities and Demigods. This I originally received as a birthday or Christmas present from my grandmother. My original copy, unfortunately, got destroyed by a friend when he borrowed it. We replaced it. I was fortuitously benefited from a copy of the version that has the Melnibonéan and Cthulhu mythos in it. So the front has the credit and acknowledgement to Chaosium for using that. And then the Cthulhu mythos actually looks like that. There's our friend Cthulhu. And then the Melnibonéan mythos looks like that. And then after that, got myself a copy of the Monster Manual 2, the Fiend Folio, 100th Arcana, which has had better days. Also, Oriental Adventures. I wound up with a newer copy of the Legends and Lore. This also was given to me by my grandmother. I never had the heart to tell her that it was the same book that she'd gotten me before, and of course wrote my name on the inside cover of it. And unfortunately, she died later that same year, so that's one of my last memories of her, is giving me that book. And I think the Fiend Folio also has her handwriting still left in it from that being a present from her. And then I had one copy also of the newer Player's Handbook, which is always helpful if you have extra people over that don't have a copy of the rules. You can pass this out and take a look at it. I also found a lot of my materials from my own campaign world recently, and I know I've talked about that in some various places, comments and on live streams and that sort of thing. So I think we want to talk a little bit about hex maps, because part of why I'm making this video is that I created some new hex map planning worksheets and tools to develop your own hex maps. And so a lot of times we have a copy of S4, Lost Caverns of Sloshkenth, and that came with a Dungeon Master's Wilderness map and a player's version of the same map, which is not quite as full as the Dungeon Master's version. The Dungeon Master version has some encounter areas that are, of course, not on the player's map. And that's an interesting approach. Of course, you have the hex map, and another variant of that is take a look at X3, Curse of Xanathon. And this has the little inset map of the world that was originally included with the expert maps. Part of, I think, X1 Isle of Dread had this version of the world map. You can see kind of the symbology that they used on their maps. And so that's a great way to build a wilderness map, is on hexes. And unfortunately, I had difficulty finding hex paper. I think I had a tablet of red-lined hex paper. That was the only thing that they sold at the bookshop near my house that had the hobby supplies. And so I ultimately decided to do things a little differently. I often used just grid graph paper, or even drew things by hand. So there's a copy of the main sort of country and the different provinces within that country that most of the adventures for the majority of the campaigns actually takes place either in this region, or people are based in that region and they travel elsewhere. And then what we have is each of those provinces has a more detailed map. As you can see, I just kind of drew this on regular old lined paper, and eventually that got made into a full world map, and actually does kind of go all the way around. You can see it meets on the other side, so it's kind of like a cylinder, not a globe. But there's a number of other materials that go with this particular world. There's the calendar system, some other versions of that world map. Got some cities that kind of go within that world, some of the larger cities. And then also places like the grounds of one of the castles that's actually, this is not a dungeon location, this is one of their benefactors for usually one of the parties. I actually launched with 4 lower level campaign arcs, kind of the inside of that particular castle. But as you can tell, these materials have been sitting in boxes for many years and have gotten very old, and I need to actually update them and move them over. I'm not going to do grid system anymore. I've decided I want to go back to hex mapping, because now I'm not limited to one store selling one type of hex paper. But here's an example of some of my old adventures. You can just see, you know, wrote them out on paper, put them in a folder like that. Sometimes they were pretty messy. That was a random table right there. And see, rather than just one dungeon, I would typically make a number of little smaller dungeons that would all be part of the same adventure. And then sometimes they got pretty large. This particular one, I think, is like 48 handwritten pages of a long kind of higher level adventure, and it had a number of different kind of maps with it. So that's actually an outdoor map that's not even on hex paper, but I also do a number like little small dungeons. So as we think about moving over towards hex map systems, you know, buy hex or print out hex paper in whatever size you want. So this is similar kind of to, obviously it's not the same sheet, but about roughly the size of hex that was included. And this is a good way to get a region, but in terms of putting a whole world onto a hex map like this, you know, it depends on what the scale is per hex. If you wanted to do like 120 miles to a hex, you can actually fit the a hex map of the Earth onto like 6 sheets. I think my world is actually a little smaller than the Earth. It's about 22,000, a little less than 22,000 miles in circumference, whereas the Earth is almost 25,000 miles. So, you know, I've thought about the different, you know, sizes of hex, but even so, of course, you can get ridiculous and go down to very small hexes, and then you can fit more of the Earth within, or more of the planet within one page. But what ends up happening is, when you go to design your hex map, you want to go with something a little closer to this. So you'll have a number of different potential encounter areas and things that occur, you know, off map or along the border. And to make that a little bit easier for people, I've actually developed a few different sizes or variants of the same sheet. So this would be the higher detail, in the sense that there are more smaller hexes on the single section here. And you might think of this as like nesting. So, excuse me, Yasmina. So within one hex on the world map, you might find this to be that one of these hexes, and then you can subdivide that into a number of smaller areas and put different encounters or cities or villages or whatever on different parts within one of these hexes. So if you wanted to put a lot of different things and really go to town on building things into a single hex, you can use this, which is 7 hexes across. Or a moderate level of detail might be 5 hexes across. Or you might also do it where it's just total of 7 hexes. And another opportunity or option that you have would be to, make this your regional map. And then if you wanted to put details within a single one of those hexes, you could turn this into a hex map. But let's talk a little bit about how to use this. And we'll go with the moderate detail. That sort of matches about the same scale that I did with this map here. So what you have is you can, if you number your hexes from your world map, you can use that as a reference identifier so you know which hex you're zooming in on when you make this map. Give this map a title. It has a compass rose on it, but that is not marked, so you can mark your compass orientation. So if you wanted the points, if you do a map where your points are facing north, you can do it that way, or you can rotate it and put your north arrow or this way, whichever way you want to go with that. You can write a scale for the map. So, typically 6 miles was the distance across the hex that they recommended in old school D&D. You can bump that up. You could make it, for instance, like 24 miles across and say that's, about a day's journey, da 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 da. And then for each symbol that you wanted to use within the hex map, you can fill that out into these small hexes and give a little legend and key as to what you're symbolizing on your map. And then in the back, if you wanted to have, let's say, a random roll, you could, each one of these hexes would be, each one of these hexes would have a corresponding number. You could roll 2 die 10 and go from 2 to 20 and randomize your locations as far as individual hexes within the map. You could actually write in little notes about lore that's available within this whole map, the dominance. In this case, that could be factions, or you could, write a particular, like whatever the apex monster is for this particular area. Maybe there's a dragon that haunts that particular hex, and so somewhere within that hex, there's the dragon's lair. And then you could also do political factions. Whatever is the dominant influences on that particular hex could be noted in here. You can develop your own encounter tables. There's one long section here, but this could be subdivided into, if you had hills and mountains or broken lands or whatever, and you could develop a system of roles and then results. There's a little space down here for the bottom for flow charts, little maps or diagrams that you want to make. And then I have an explanation section there for each of the areas. And, each of the maps is the same on the back, except for the numbered hexes for the random rolling. And of course, that largest one has little areas outside the hex. The reason being is because the distance, if you actually measured it with a ruler, is longer on the north-south axis, the vertical axis, and a little bit narrower on the horizontal axis here, the east-west. So I actually put it outside, so you could say that if you rolled a 39 or 40 on a 2d20, those would be in the margins of the hex, or you could assign them to something else like an aerial adventure or underwater adventure, underdark kind of adventure, whatever you wanted to do. I'm going to make all 3 of these available for download from my Google Drive down in the comments section. And I think that's about it for this video. Hopefully I'll come back maybe after Christmas or in the new year and focus a little bit more on the actual details of my campaign world, because it's much different than Earth, and in fact Earth does come up in it. So I'm just going to let it go from there, and hopefully somebody will enjoy the downloads and find them useful. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again in the next video.